Hi, I'm Jason Baile here at Jupiter Hills Club with our performance director, Lance Gill. We're going to talk a little bit about how pressure, mass, weight, all those terms we throw around, how they apply in different parts for different shots.
One of the common misconceptions is that pressure and weight are different, which they are. But when you're in a static position such as setup, your pressure and your weight, or your center of pressure and your weight, are relatively the same. And the awareness of where your center of pressure / weight is vital to these setups that you're talking about. So why don't you go through 3 different setups, and then we'll start talking about how the pressure and weight can be adjusted.
Great, so we're going to talk about the first setup would be, I've got a lob wedge here. We're going to hit like a off-speed wedge shot, so something that's less than full. So if I walked in and created that setup, I'd have more pressure or weight to the left. I would slide the mass, the big part of me up here, more in front of the golf ball, and my stance would narrow quite a bit for this kind of off-speed shot.
Okay, so your pressure and weight would be more biased onto your lead foot.
Yeah, right now it's set up, I feel like it's like 85 or 90.
Okay, all right. So what about with a 7-iron?
With a 7-iron, stance is going to widen out just a little bit. Ball position remains basically the same. And as I set up into that, with my stance wider, my mass is slid back a little bit now. When I set up in here at this point, I feel like 55 to 60 is left.
Now this is a key point. 55 to 60% of his pressure and weight is on his left foot at setup. This is almost indecipherable to an untrained person. Now let's go to driver.
So with driver, I'm going to walk in, ball position is going to slide more underneath my armpit, and as I set up in this position, left hip goes high, I feel like 50-50.
Okay, so 50-50. We've gone through the whole spectrum of 85 to 90 on the left, 60 on the left, to 50-50. And to do that, we need to have an awareness. We need to have a sensitivity in the differences between our right and left feet. And too many of our amateur golfers don't have the ability to discern between the pressure shifts. We did a test with Brad Faxenbeck when he was on tour putting, and one of the cool things we found was during his entire putting stroke, his pressure was very consistent on his back left heel. It never moved more than 1 or 2 pounds per square inch during his entire putting stroke. And this is from one of the better golfers on the planet. And when we see our wedge, 7-iron, and drivers, the better players tend to set up with these pressures. So a very simple drill we can do to gain awareness of the pressure on the right and left is simply by balancing on right foot and then balancing on left foot. And you're gonna get the your sensitivity dial, honed in a little bit just by going from right to left. Because theoretically right now I'm 100% on my right, I'm 100% on my left, in the exact opposite order, of course. And that, to me, is a very simple way to get our athletes to understand where they are in space. Because when we put them on a force plate in our bay, invariably you say, I want 60% loaded on the left, they're 75 right. So we have to gain the awareness and tune their sensitivity dial in.
Big difference between the tour players that we coach and some of the recreational players is just how tight that sensitivity dial is, correct?
Correct. On tour players, we say go 55, they might get it to 52, 53. We say on amateurs, go 55 lead, they might go to 65, 80 right. Their swoops, or their pluses and minuses are much larger than the tour players. But that's not because they're tour players, it's because they haven't practiced tuning that sensitivity dial in.
Yeah, and so tuning in the sensitivity dial to anything is really important to your improvement, and making sure that your setup, your pressure, your weight, your mass all match the shot that you're trying to hit, Team Titleist.